for all the people who really get something from the show still to this day, 30 years later. So it's one of those astonishing, iconic shows that I think across all of the various franchises now, I guess they're called, everybody seems to, it brings a smile to everyone's face.
And I suppose, Alexander, in terms of your own representation and role, you've done many things throughout your career, from Vertical Limit to Kingdom of Heaven, Clash of the Titans, TV series like Gotham, Peaky Blinders, Stargate Atlantis. And was Star Trek your first sort of quest into that sort of sci-fi role? Had you done any major sci-fi roles or representations before Star Trek? Was this your first quest into that sort of sci-fi genre? And
it was only my second job. It wasn't my not just the first sci-fi thing I did. It's that my second job ever. So it was maybe my third actually. I'd done a film and a TV series, a very quick one in the quick one. It's a long one, but it was a quick job for me back in the early 90s. So by the time I got to Star Trek, I was a novice.
Okay, and were you sort of you're going on to an iconic show which has such a representation back in the 70s and 80s with William Shatner. Were you like, when you landed this role, was it research? I have to research this, what has gone before me. I have to sort of see, in terms of delve myself into the universe, learn all the customs, the sort of techniques in terms of, so that I can play an portrayal of the people who have played that role, like the great Robert Picardo, and Picardo is still with us, and people like that who've played doctor roles. Were you sort of
Robert came after me, even though I really enjoyed his performance, and I still enjoy everything he does. But you know, you pick up if you regarding research for sci-fi, specifically Deep Space Nine, and I played a doctor, for those who don't know. You pick up a medical textbook, it's not going to help you. It's a 24th century show. So anything that might happen today in whatever's going on in medical, I mean, the basic anatomy of the human bodies are the same. But if I'm not mistaken, my character studied interspecies medicine, which is sort of speciality, which is kind of not something you can pick up from Wikipedia. And so I know is the answer. Much as I would have liked the reassurance, the crutch of being able to lean on the research that I could have done, it would have been entirely useless. No, I just had faith in the writers and tried to learn my lines and turn up to work on time.
And I suppose, Alexander, in terms of being a spin-off sort of show from a previous show that went before you, did you almost feel that pressure those first 5 or 6 episodes, in terms of starting off with a flurry, starting with a bang, to try and bring over that audience that was already there in the Star Trek, to bring them along with you, and also sort of get a new sort of following in terms of that? Because sometimes when you have cult followings of TV shows, when there's a spin-off, in terms of that, the reaction can be very positive early on, or the reaction can be, oh my God, what are they doing to my sort of TV show, sort of such and that. And you took a twist. You took a sort of twin spin off it, because you put it on a space station as sort of such, rather than a spaceship, in terms of that we were all so used of in terms of Star Trek. So you were bold in terms of what you tried to do. So was there a bit of nervous sort of tension to see how it would go down originally with the audience?
Not from me. I mean, if they'd canceled the show day one, I would have still considered myself way ahead. I was up. I've never been to Hollywood. I've never been in an American TV show, so everything was just gravy. You know, everything was fantastic. I couldn't possibly. Couldn't possibly be a situation where it would go badly for me. And they shielded us from kind of the bad news until a bit later, till we've been doing it like for a while. Like the show wasn't doing as well as they wanted, and people were upset that it was on a space station, and you know what, all that other stuff. So for me, I was just loving life. I was this naive 26-year-old, 27-year-old boy who just hanging around in West Hollywood, sort of just on the cloud nine. So the only way was up for me. I was really, really happy, whatever anyone did. And I didn't understand politics of TV and canceling shows. And, you know, people had to explain to me at the end of every season, well, we're just waiting to see if we come back next season. I'd be like, I'm going to come back. Good. This is great. Let's try that. So
And
yeah, we did that 7 times.
And I heard Alexander in terms of the Deep Space Nine, in terms of the set. I would dare to say it was almost like, from what I heard, it was like two airplane hangars. It was absolutely massive by all accounts, the space station itself. That if you weren't familiar with it and you were a sort of guest actor, you could sort of easily get lost if you were took a break in between sets and went off on a gander trying to make your way back. It was that sort of big and sort of huge, and all the detail that
Absolutely.
went into it. You mentioned that being your sort of your third show. Were you sort of, was the eyes wide open when you arrived on and you saw this sort of set in
Sure.
front of you, in terms of like, oh my God, this is something that I couldn't have predicted, how on a grand scale how big this is.
Absolutely. I mean, I parked in a car park where you had to have a pass to get into the car park. And then I just found my little spot. And then you walk in through the Lucille Ball gate at Paramount Studios, and everything looks like a studio should look, tons of people running around and golf buggies and busy, busy, busy. And on one side of the street, if you looked at it from the air, there were three airport hangars, looked like airport hangars, as you suggested, which was the Next Generation, because they were still filming. And opposite them, across the street, was our three hangars, and that was Deep Space Nine. So we coexisted with the Next Generation for the first, I think, 3 years or maybe 2 years. So we got to know them, and they were very friendly. We were very different. We were much more serious than they were. But then they've been doing it for a few years, and were genuinely a big hit. And we were much more sort of, I guess, our older sort of veteran actors like Renee and Armin, they were pros, and they didn't like to mess around. They didn't like to, they wanted to get the job done as well as they could. And so we were I describe us as a professional sober outfit, whereas the next gen lot were practical jokers and pranksters, and would come on our set and sing from behind the cyc, from behind the big cyclorama with stars on it, that when you look out of the spaceships or space station, you see stars, and then you hear the people singing behind it. So it's the Next Generation actors, led by
And
Jonathan Frakes, usually.
And I suppose, Alexander, in terms of that, you mentioned about you were sort of more sort of chilled, and that couldn't have come across more in terms of the lead of your show, Avery Books, who played Benjamin Sisko. It almost like nothing sort of phased him. You could be having a dance, a murder, a kidnapping, a bank robbery, and he was just so chilled, so sort of mellowed, and the way he presented and brought his lines. There was no great highs and ups and lows. Everything was just so cool, so breeze like a tangent, in terms of, was he very
He
that
was
sort of chilled like that
he was
offset as well?
Avery was capable of great emotion, believe me, but he was actually very chilled off stage, and he was extremely relaxed, and unruffled, as you say. And it's but he was, as an actor, he could hit some serious extremes. But if he got angry with you, I would never cross him.
Yeah.
He would make me shrivel in my shoes from about 40 yards if he wanted to. Like, hey, Dr. Bashir, and I'm like, whoa. Oh. So he could really mess you. And I didn't mess with him.
And I suppose we're back in the early 90s, and there's no such, I know there was great technologies in terms of the set and what you could do in terms of projecting sort of sci-fi equations, but there was no real green screen back then in terms of that. So you probably had the props, the sort of weapons in terms of those sort of lasers, in
We
terms of
did.
those
I mean, I
subteam.
get what you're.
Yeah. Was that
I
sort
get what
of
you're.
enjoyable as an actor, or sort of such that you don't have to imagine, dare I say, something in your head like we have with all the actors need to do these days?
Well, actually, because we were working at Paramount Studios, and we had a relatively high budget, green screen was creeping into the business, was already
Yeah.
being used. And so we did get to see the beginning of green screen and stop motion, and work with, and locked off cameras and all the sort of things that the early days of what the modern technology is now so amazingly good at, we were doing. We were being suspended off wires from our back, and all those scenes had to be shot in green screen when we were floating around the place. So that did exist. But we also had to do a lot of, in camera special effects, which is
Yeah.
stuff that you have to sort of literally film as near as you can to the effect that you like, rather than we'll just paint it in later. And then, slowly build the shot. So some of those things took a lot longer than they do now. But it was pretty cutting edge.
Yeah, I suppose, Alexander, you mentioned there about being a young buck, only 26 and 27, fresh into the business. I imagine you threw yourself into most of all your own stunts that you had to do. There was no sort of getting a double to sort of step in for you and then getting the close-up shots afterwards. I imagine you sort of engulfed and say, right, let's go at it.
Pretty much, but I mean, we all had to, by union rules, have stunt people, and we had an excellent stunt crew who did some of the stuff. But yes, they would generally let me do my own thing because they weren't too worried if if I hurt myself, because I was kind of bouncy. But yes, we had stunt doubles, and we did our own stuff where we could, because it's just quicker, Then you don't have to find a face and do that extra shot. You can just film the scene and move on.
And I suppose, in terms of Alexander, you did 7 seasons, but were you sort of comfortable after the second season that there would be sort of, maybe, dare I say, there might be a contract or renewal for another 2 or 3 seasons, or were you always conscious to try and hit particular figures? But did you take it a season at a time in terms of not just knowing would you be renewed or not? And as an actor, I suppose in these sorts of series, anyone can bite the bullet. It's but sci-fi, the great thing about sci-fi is you can be recast, you can come back again, so you never really sort of die in that sort of universe. But was there always that sort of treaded caution, or when did you get a sense of comfortability in terms of being on Star
Probably
Trek?
about season 5. Probably about season 5. I mean, especially the pros like Nana and Renee and Armin. They would always be like, "This, don't believe a word you hear. That we could be cancelled any second. Watch out. Anything can happen." Because they'd been through it. They'd been in TV shows that were cancelled suddenly. They appeared to be popular, but boom, they went. So they never quite believed it when we came, until we actually came back. But about season 5, I think 4, maybe we knew we'd go 6 seasons, and we were kind of informed 6 seasons is a kind of guarantee, and we were lucky, I guess, to get a 7th.
And I suppose, Alexander, you dedicate your life to that. It's probably an 8, 9 months of a shoot all season. You're probably, as you mentioned, you did 173 episodes. So you're probably rolling out maybe 25, 26 episodes a sort of season. It's a long sort of marathon doing that over 6 or 7 years. When you sort of Star Trek came to an end, did you think to yourself for a while, listen, I want to do the guest star roles in TVs. I want to do a movie now and then, maybe, and I'll say, but I don't want to sort of throw myself back into that sort of thing where I'm committed for 5 or 6 years? Or were you young and fresh when do you say to yourself, yeah, let's go again if that opportunity comes around the corner?
At the time when we finished season 7, I was desperate to get out. Not because I was ungrateful, but because I'd been acting for now 8, 9 years. I mean, that's quite a long time, and I'd only done 3 roles, so I really wanted to try something else. And I was really looking forward to it. I had no idea how difficult it would be to begin again, but I persevered, and I had a really terrific agent, Pippa Markham at the time, and she worked her way to get me another job, one of which was the Reign of Fire, which we shot in Dublin and Wicklow Gap down there.
Yeah, and I suppose, Alexander, we know certain characters and actors can be tied to a certain actor. We just look at the Big Bang Theory and the Sheldon Cooper character, and the actor that sort of plays that is he's tied to it as almost such that in terms that he's recognized for that character. To try and change your look or your appearance or something like that is very sort of hard. But probably you didn't have that sort of. Did you have that experience? Well, for the first maybe year that you came out of sort of Star Trek, well, people were saying, well, that's Julian Bashir or something like that. Is that the guy from Star Trek? Were you trying to make yourself unique and trying to bridge or go away from that universe to get your own individuality as an actor, or was that ever really a problem for you?
It was absolutely a problem, and it's a problem for every actor from Star Trek back in those days, and because it wasn't considered legitimate acting. You know, it was considered like, I don't know what it was considered, but it was sort of a kind of taken as a kind of joke. And so if you wanted to play be a serious actor, you had to bust out of that somehow. And it's incredibly difficult to do. And you have no agency as a young actor. You know, you can't pick and choose what you get or what you do. You have to do whatever comes along because you never know when the next bus will arrive. And so I just lucked out. Took me a little while to get my sea legs, but I got a couple of rolls, and then snowball, very tiny little things started to roll down the hill.
I suppose, Alexander, before I bring you on to one or two other things, I just have to talk about it because some of the actors I've spoken down through the years that have been involved in hit sci-fi shows, they just go on about the conventions that happen all over the world and go to these conventions and being shocked, dare I say, the jaws dropping in front of nowhere the world, parts of the world, and what they have seen in terms of these conventions. Well, people say the fans go wild, but in terms of the actors, their eyes just drop to the floor in terms of what they see in front of them happening in these conventions, in terms of the really sort of die-hard fans all over the world. And was one going to your maybe first convention, or I don't know if you've been to many Star Trek conventions, was it a real eye-opening experience to you to see, oh my God, this is the sort of effect we have left on these certain sort of people in this part of the world, or something like that?
Yes, I was pretty shocked, but I was really just shocked at the automatic love, you know, from a bunch of different people, from different backgrounds, all kinds of different people. Back in the day, you know, thousands would arrive, and it was the beginning, you know, I mean, of what now is cosplay. Everybody does it. But in those days, it was considered really unusual, to put it mildly. But now, you know, there are vast festivals in Atlanta, Georgia, for example, where 75,000 fans will turn up and in cosplay outfits. But the genesis of all that was the original Star Trek conventions. And you know, Comic-Con wouldn't be happening now if it wasn't for those early conventions. It's kind of surprising, but it's just it's amazing to be hugged by 3,000 people in a room, metaphorically, to be just loved. And you never take that for granted. And the kind of audiences are slightly different now because a lot more people are accepted than back in those days. People thought Star Treks were kind of nerds or something, so slightly odd, but nerd is kind of cool nowadays. So it's a lot more people have arrived on the scene, a more general audience. But those early pioneers who actually brought back Star Trek from cancellation through a write-in campaign were amazing. They were amazing, amazing people.
I suppose, Alexander, before we came on the air, you mentioned about a TV show that you're currently sort of working on that has its big airing coming up soon. You might enlighten all our viewers and our listeners who wants to see Alexander Siddig on 2024 on their TV screens. What show can we find you? What's the role? And
well, what I'm currently shooting is David Goyer's Foundation for Apple Plus, which is really good fun. So I'm in that. I'm loving being part of a huge sci-fi again. This is really one of the most ambitious based on the Asimov novels. So it's vast, and people may have already seen seasons 1 and 2. So I'm coming in to do a little something for season 3.
So you're shooting and filming season 3. Would it be the fall, maybe August next year?
I have no idea. That's above my pay grade.
Okay, that's no problem. That's no problem, Alexander. And Alexander, you mentioned before we came on air, and you mentioned it there about being in Wicklow and Dublin, shooting The Rain of Fire in your time in Ireland. And no doubt you visited Ireland many times. Have you any sort of memories or stories or your experience of Emerald Isle?
I mean, I loved it. I shot the Primeval series. I'm sure everybody knows that was shot in Dublin. And well, everybody in Ireland maybe it was some people in Ireland. Let me just backtrack all the way down. But a few people, 1 or 2 people, 1 person maybe, knows that we shot that in Dublin. But I was familiar with it already because I'd already shot a movie called Rain of Fire about dragons in Dublin and Wicklow. I'd worked with a great Matthew McConaughey and Christian Bale, and I think it was my second feature film, so second proper, Hollywood studio film. So I was pretty fresh behind the ears. And yes, I won't give away. I've died so many times on screen. That's just, that was when I began to realize my characters are due to die from now. If I'd known now that I'm pretty much 60 years old, that I was going to die as many times as I did on TV, I would be like, huh. But it was great fun. Had a terrific time. I remember fantastic oysters,
Okay.
like the best I've ever tasted. I remember, yeah, I mean, it was just a wonderful, wonderful place. Matthew McConaughey is a method actor, so that was pretty strange. I haven't come across many in my career, not ones that I know about. So we had to call him Van Zan, which was his character name that the first AD came into our trailer and said, you don't refer to him, even if you meet him on the street in Dublin, do not refer to him as Matthew or Mr. McConaughey. You have to call him Van Zan. That's awkward. And it continued to be awkward for the whole shoot, but it was good fun. We had a good time.
Alexander started to find the penultimate question, because I just thought of one more before we come on to the final question. Colm Meaney, I suppose, Irish actor, Irish owned. I suppose you
Love
probably
him.
build up a friendship with him throughout the 7 or 8 seasons. Is that friendship still remain to this day? Or you
I've sadly
Colm
lost
still in touch?
contact with him. I've kind of lost contact with him. Actors do lose contact with each other. We're like ships in an armada, and once we separate, we join other armadas and other, groups of ships. We just don't get back together very often. And I'm sad about that, because Colm is a lovely man, and I really enjoy his company. We used to, do St. Patrick's Night together. We'd hire a limo in Los Angeles and just pub crawl all the Irish bars. And we were left in quite a stupor by the end of the evening, but we had a good time. And I watch his career and really enjoy his work. So I know he moved to Spain for a bit, or I heard he did. I hear stuff about
Yeah.
him, and occasionally I hope I might join him at a convention stage somewhere. But we both do so few conventions that I don't know. Maybe, inshallah.
Yeah. And Alexander, my final question to you. Let's pretend there was a Star Trek encyclopedia, a dictionary as such, of all the Star Trek characters that appeared throughout the decades in the various Star Trek shows and
You don't have to
spin-off
pretend.
shows.
There is one.
There is. And let's say your character, Julian Bashir, was put into that sort of dictionary, and they left 2 blank sentences underneath his name in terms of a synopsis and a description. And they came to you, Alexander Siddig, through your talent agent, and they said, we want you to write that synopsis to describe Julian Bashir in 2 sentences, having portrayed him. What would you like those 2 sentences to read?
I guess it would be like Julian Bashir is a really empathetic human being and doctor, and he will grow up in front of your eyes.